Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Snoozy Scientist, where we gently wander through the mysteries of science, one sleepy yawn at a time. Whether you're listening from the quiet of your bed, wrapped in a blanket, or simply floating in that dreamy space between waking and sleep, you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight, we're drifting into Earth's forgotten past, to a time when monsters were not born of legend, but of biology. Creatures so immense, so fearsome, that they blur the line between nightmare and reality. Imagine massive snakes that make anacondas look like babies, stretching longer than city buses, strong enough to crush a crocodile with their coil, or sharks with teeth the size of human hands that hunt giant whales, or creatures so tall that they would stare down today's giraffe before taking flight on their massive wings, larger than a small airplane. These weren't legends, these were real creatures that once ruled our planet. Monsters born not of myth but of evolution. There's comfort in knowing we will never face them, and yet a strange awe in imagining how life once thrived in shapes that seem closer to nightmares than to animals. But why did they disappear, and what would life look like if they had not? Tonight, we'll wander softly through their stories, not to frighten, but to wonder. This is not a journey into horror, but into awe. A calm walk through Earth's forgotten monsters, the terrifying creatures you'll be glad are extinct. But before we begin, if you enjoy videos like this, slow, soothing, and quietly filled with wonder, I'd love it if you gave this one a gentle like and maybe tap subscribe. It helps more curious minds like you find their way to this peaceful little corner of the internet and lets the algorithm know that sleep and science belong together. And if you'd be so kind, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from tonight and what time is it there? It's always such a joy to see how far across the world this sleepy little journey travels. So now take a deep breath, let your shoulders loosen, and let's begin. In the steaming lowland swamps of what is now northern South America, a predator moved with such quiet certainty that almost nothing in its path could escape. This was not the kind of snake we know today, winding through branches or slipping across the forest floor in search of small prey. This was Titanoboa, a serpent so immense that it makes the largest living anaconda seem like a coiled child's toy. Nearly 50 feet in length and weighing over 2,500 pounds, its body was thicker than the trunk of a tree. To imagine Titanoboa in its full size is to picture a living river of muscle gliding effortlessly through the mire. The story of this extraordinary creature was written in stone, uncovered in the depths of Colombian coal mines. There, in the Cerrejón Formation, fossil hunters found vertebrae so massive they dwarfed those of any modern snake. Piece by piece, the skeleton revealed itself, telling scientists that this was not just a scaled-up version of what we see today. It was something altogether different, a giant made possible by a climate that no longer exists. 58 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs had vanished, the tropics of South America were far hotter and more humid than they are now. Temperatures hovered near the upper limits of what vertebrate life could endure. In such conditions, reptiles, whose bodies depend on warmth from their surroundings, could grow to extraordinary sizes. Titanoboa was a product of this greenhouse world, a serpent that could stretch across the length of a city bus and still have coils to spare. The swamps it haunted were filled with early relatives of crocodiles and turtles, creatures that grew large themselves in the oppressive heat. Titanoboa would have slipped silently through this world, almost invisible in the murky water until it struck. With muscles thicker than a grown man's torso, it had the strength to encircle and crush prey the size of alligators. A single squeeze would have been enough to stop blood flow and collapse lungs. Once subdued, the victim would be swallowed whole, sliding into the snake's endless body, where digestion would take days or even weeks. To envision such a scene is to understand the delicate balance of ancient ecosystems. Titanoboa was not an outlier, but a ruler of its time, one link in a chain of giants supported by climate and abundance. In its watery world, trees towered, insects thrived at sizes that seem unreal to us, and reptiles found a paradise that allowed them to push the limits of growth. The discovery of Titanoboa gave scientists a living thermometer, evidence that ancient Earth was far warmer than any modern climate. Only in such heat could a snake's metabolism sustain a body so vast. Yet even this mighty predator was bound to the rhythms of the planet. As the climate cooled in the millions of years that followed, reptiles like Titanoboa could no longer maintain such colossal size. The air grew less stifling, the swamps began to change, and slowly the giants disappeared. The world shifted toward a new balance, one that favored smaller snakes and different predators. Titanoboa left behind no direct descendants, only bones pressed into stone that tell us how immense life can become when conditions allow. The vision of this serpent sliding through a swamp, its head lifting above the water like a rising log, its coils rippling with silent strength, is a reminder of just how alien Earth's past could feel. It was a world shaped by heat and water, where reptiles grew until they were as long as houses and as heavy as a small car. The fact that such a creature once lived, hunted, and thrived speaks to the remarkable adaptability of life and the extremes it can reach. And as we leave behind the swamps where Titanoboa coiled and returned to the seas, we find another giant, one whose name has become legend among the predators of deep time. It was a shark with jaws wide enough to swallow a human whole, and it hunted not fish but whales. This was Megalodon, the true master of the oceans. Far beneath the waves, long after the age of dinosaurs had ended, there was a hunter so vast that even the largest creatures alive today would have been no match for it. This was Megalodon, the shark that turned the oceans into its hunting grounds and fed on whales as though they were nothing more than ordinary prey. To imagine its scale is to imagine something close to the impossible. Megalodon stretched close to 60 feet in length, roughly 3 times the size of the largest great white shark known today. Its mouth could open wide enough to swallow 2 adults standing side by side, and its bite force has been estimated at around 40,000 pounds, strong enough to shatter bone as though it were driftwood. The teeth of this giant still lie scattered in the sediments of ancient seas, each one a fossilized blade, triangular and serrated. Some are longer than a human hand from base to tip, thick and heavy, carrying the wear marks of countless meals. They are often found in coastal deposits around the world, from North America to South America, from Europe to Africa, and even in the shallows of Australia. These teeth are more than relics. They are the signature of a predator that once dominated the oceans across nearly every corner of the globe. When scientists began to uncover not only these massive teeth, but also the fossilized bones of whales bearing deep gouges and bite marks, the story of Megalodon's hunting power became clear. This was not a shark content with small fish or seals, it was a hunter of giants. The grooves cut into ancient whale vertebrae match perfectly with the serrated edges of Megalodon's teeth. The spacing of the marks reveals the span of a jaw, so enormous that it makes modern predators pale by comparison. These fossil wounds are frozen evidence of struggles in seas long gone, battles where whales tried to escape but were torn apart by jaws that seemed to belong more to a myth than to an animal. The ocean in which Megalodon thrived was different from the seas we know today. Roughly 23 to 3 million years ago, during the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, the waters were warmer and coastlines stretched wider across continents. These seas supported a booming population of marine mammals. Early ancestors of whales, dolphins, and seals filled the oceans, offering Megalodon a rich and constant food source. The shark's size was both its advantage and its necessity. A body that large demanded an immense amount of food, and the oceans of that age were capable of providing it. To picture Megalodon swimming through those waters is to see a shadow passing beneath the waves that would blot out the sun. Its dorsal fin alone would have been taller than a grown person. If one had been cruising near the surface, the outline of its back would have resembled the hull of a small boat. It was a creature perfectly built for dominance, moving with the silent grace of a shark, but carrying the weight and power of something closer to a sea monster from legend. Yet even giants are bound by the rules of the earth. Over time, the climate began to change. The oceans cooled as ice spread across the poles, and with that cooling came shifts in the distribution of prey. Many of the warm water whales that Megalodon depended on either vanished or adapted by moving into colder regions where the great shark could not easily follow. A predator that needed to eat constantly to sustain its immense bulk suddenly faced dwindling food supplies. The very size that once made Megalodon supreme became its greatest vulnerability. As the millions of years rolled forward, Megalodon faded from the oceans, leaving behind only its scattered teeth and the scars etched into fossil bones. Without the warmth and abundance of its prime seas, the shark could not endure. Its disappearance cleared the way for other hunters to rise, from the ancestors of orcas to the great white shark, which, though formidable, remains only a fraction of the size. The image of Megalodon lingers not only in science, but in the imagination. A shark longer than a school bus, with jaws powerful enough to bite through a whale's rib cage, patrolled waters that covered the very coasts where cities stand today. Each fossil tooth is a reminder that our planet was once home to predators beyond anything we see now, and just as Titanoboa once ruled the swamps on land, Megalodon reigned as the undisputed monarch of the seas. From the depths where its shadow passed, our journey now moves further back in time to oceans filled with armored fish that could shear prey in half with jaws of bone. This was Dunkleosteus, a predator from the Devonian seas, and its bite was said to rival even the crushing power of Megalodon itself. In the seas of the Devonian period, long before the first dinosaurs took shape on land, there swam a predator unlike any fish alive today. The oceans of that time, over 350 million years ago, were filled with early forms of life, from armored trilobites crawling along the seafloor to the first forests beginning to root on land. Yet in these ancient waters, there was one creature that dominated above all others, a giant fish wrapped in armor and armed with jaws so powerful that even the mightiest predators of later ages would have seemed fragile in comparison. This was Dunkleosteus, a name that still carries the echo of its terror. Unlike sharks and bony fish of our modern seas, Dunkleosteus did not have teeth. Instead, it carried bone-plated jaws, sharpened by use into blades that worked like giant shears. Each time it closed its mouth, the edges of these plates met with slicing precision. They could shear through flesh, crush bone, and open prey as if it were nothing more than paper. Scientists studying the shape of those jaws estimate that Dunkleosteus had one of the most powerful bites in the history of life, stronger even than that of a Tyrannosaurus rex. A single snap could deliver thousands of pounds of force, enough to break through the armored shells of other ancient fish. Its head alone stretched over 3 feet in length, plated with heavy bony shields that gave it the look of a living fortress. The body behind it, though less often preserved in fossils, likely stretched up to 30 feet long. Imagine a fish the size of a bus, its head gleaming with plates like iron, gliding through murky waters with slow, certain movements. Smaller fish, early sharks, and even other armored predators were all potential prey. With a mouth that could open in a fraction of a second, Dunkleosteus could create a suction strong enough to draw in its victim, closing its jaws before the prey had any chance to react. Evidence suggests that this monster of the Devonian seas could swallow creatures half its own size. Fossil remains show bones of prey that were partially digested but shattered, a sign of the immense crushing power inside its armored skull. Nothing in its environment could resist for long. It was not only its bite that gave Dunkleosteus its place as an apex predator, but also its sheer presence. Few creatures could challenge something so large, so heavily protected, and so efficient in its hunting strategy. The Devonian period is often called the Age of Fishes, and for good reason. The seas were teeming with new experiments in body design, from primitive sharks to the earliest lobe-finned fish that would eventually crawl onto land. Yet, in this great age of innovation, Dunkleosteus reigned supreme. Its combination of armor, power, and speed made it a peak in evolutionary design, the top of the food chain in oceans that were still shaping the possibilities of life. To stand before this creature, had humans existed then, would have been like looking into a nightmare given form. Its jaw plates gleamed like polished blades. Its body moved with the certainty of a machine designed only for domination. And when it struck, there was little left but silence in the water as it swallowed its prize whole. But like many giants in Earth's history, Dunkleosteus was not immune to change. The late Devonian was a time of upheaval. Shifts in climate and sea levels, combined with a mass extinction event, swept many species from the oceans. Dunkleosteus, despite all its advantages, was among those that vanished. Its armored head and shattered prey bones remain as fossils pressed into stone, reminders of a time when the seas were ruled by a predator that had no equal. From the depths of the Devonian seas, life continued to evolve, reshaping itself into new forms. And as the shadow of Dunkleosteus faded, another line of predators would take the stage, this time not in the oceans, but on land. Towering birds with hooked beaks, sprinting across ancient plains, would rise to claim their turn as rulers of the hunt. Across the windswept plains and tangled forests of ancient South America, long after the age of the dinosaurs had ended, a new kind of predator stepped into the role of hunter. It was not a mammal with sharp teeth or claws. It was not a reptile slithering or lurking in swamps. It was a bird. Yet it was unlike any bird we know today. Towering up to 10 feet in height, these were the terror birds, a family of flightless giants that ruled their landscapes with speed, strength, and beaks built for destruction. Their wings had withered to stubs too small for flight, but they did not need to soar. Their power came from the ground. Long muscular legs carried them across grasslands and open spaces with the stride of a sprinter. Fossilized footprints preserved in hardened earth reveal the force of their steps, each imprint pressed deep, spaced far apart, telling us that these birds could run at speeds fast enough to overtake almost any prey that shared their world. Imagine the sound of such a creature racing toward you, talons clawing the soil, its shadow stretching across the ground as it closed the distance in seconds. But speed was only half of their weaponry. The true terror lay in their skulls. Terror birds had large curved beaks, shaped like deadly hooks. Each strike of the beak came down with the precision of a blade and the crushing strength of a hammer. With one swing of its head, a terror bird could break bone, puncture skulls, and tear through flesh. Prey animals had little chance once caught in their path. The beak was not a delicate tool like those of modern birds of prey. It was a brutal instrument, sharpened by evolution to end lives quickly and efficiently. But for millions of years, South America was an isolated continent, cut off from North America and the rest of the world. In this secluded land, strange and unique animals evolved. Without the presence of large carnivorous mammals, Birds stepped into the role of apex predator. Terror birds filled that gap. They hunted ancient horses, giant rodents, and smaller mammals that grazed on the grasslands. Fossil remains show that some of their prey could have been almost as large as themselves, yet the birds' speed and weapon like beaks gave them the upper hand. They were the rulers of their world, standing above the creatures they pursued, striking down with unstoppable force. Their reign lasted for millions of years, from the smaller species standing around 3 feet tall to the giants that reached the height of a basketball hoop. These birds thrived in many different environments. Some lived in forests, darting between trees. Others dominated the open savannas, using their long strides to chase down fleeing animals. Each species adapted to its surroundings, but all carried the same fearsome legacy of hooked beaks and predatory might. As South America eventually connected with North America, a great exchange of animals began. Big cats, bears, and other powerful carnivores moved southward, while creatures like armadillos and giant sloths traveled north. For the terror birds, this marked the beginning of change. Suddenly, they were forced to compete with predators that relied not only on speed, but also on claws, teamwork, and stealth. For a time, some species managed to hold their ground, even pushing north into parts of what is now the United States. Fossils found in Florida show that at least one kind of terror bird ventured far beyond its original home. But the age of mammalian hunters had begun, and the terror bird slowly slipped into history. Still, the image of these towering predators lingers in the fossil record. A 10-foot tall bird, sprinting across open plains with a beak capable of crushing a skull, is not something easily forgotten. To walk where their footprints remain is to imagine a time when birds, not beasts, were the dominant hunters of the land. The terror they inspired has faded into stone, but their story continues in the quiet layers of earth, waiting to be uncovered. And just as the ground of South America once trembled under their steps, so too did other parts of the world echo with the movements of predators that seemed impossibly large. Along the rivers of ancient Africa, another hunter grew to lengths even greater, lurking in the water and striking at unsuspecting dinosaurs. This was Sarcosuchus, the crocodile that hunted giants of the land. In the heart of prehistoric Africa, where wide rivers carved through lush floodplains, an enormous predator waited in silence. The water hid its body, only a pair of eyes and nostrils breaking the surface, motionless among drifting plants and ripples of sunlight. To any creature stepping too close, the river seemed calm. But beneath, in the shadowy depths, lurked Sarcosuchus, a reptile so large and powerful that it could drag dinosaurs into the water. Sarcosuchus was not the crocodile we know today. It was twice the length of the largest crocodiles alive in modern rivers, stretching up to 40 feet from snout to tail. Its skull alone was more than 6 feet long, lined with over 100 teeth. Each tooth was conical and strong, perfect for gripping prey and preventing any chance of escape. Unlike the heavy, blunt snouts of many modern crocodiles, Sarcosuchus carried a broad and elongated skull, giving it a distinctive shape and perhaps even allowing it to clamp down with incredible force. Fossil discoveries in the Sahara Desert reveal the scale of this extraordinary reptile. What is now barren sand was once a green landscape filled with rivers, lakes, and dense vegetation. These waterways supported a community of fish, turtles, and amphibians, but also herds of small and medium-sized dinosaurs that came to the water to drink. For Sarcosuchus, the river's edge was a hunting ground. Its ambush was as sudden as it was devastating. With a burst of strength, it could launch itself from the water, clamping its massive jaws around a dinosaur's leg or body, dragging it down in a violent spray of mud and foam. The evidence for its predatory habits lies in its anatomy. Those long, narrow jaws may not have been designed for crushing bones like the bite of a Tyrannosaurus, but they were perfectly suited to grip and hold. Once Sarcosuchus had seized a victim, there was little chance of escape. Scientists believe it may have fed on both fish and land animals, alternating between snatching prey from the water and lunging at dinosaurs that strayed too close to the shore. Its immense size gave it confidence, for few creatures of its time could challenge it. As an apex predator, Sarcosuchus ruled the rivers of Cretaceous Africa. Imagine a riverbank alive with the calls of dinosaurs and the fluttering of early birds. The air was hot, the water thick with life, and somewhere beneath the surface, this giant reptile drifted unseen, its scaly hide blended with the murky water. To unsuspecting prey, the surface may have seemed empty until it erupted in a whirl of motion. The jaws slammed shut, water churned, and the predator retreated with its struggling prize. In such moments, the line between land and river blurred, and the dominance of Sarcosuchus was absolute. Its immense body suggests it could weigh several tons, and yet, like all crocodilian relatives, it was perfectly adapted for its semi-aquatic life. Its limbs were short and sturdy, useful for shoving its body across sandbanks when the rivers receded. Its tail was long and muscular, a propeller that gave sudden bursts of speed underwater. These features tell us that Sarcosuchus was a creature shaped by patience, ambush, and overwhelming power. The Sahara, where so many of its fossils have been found, was not yet a desert during its reign. It was a green world, crisscrossed with waterways, where early flowering plants began to spread and dinosaurs flourished. Sarcosuchus shared these environments with herbivores that grazed on the floodplains and carnivores that stalked the land. Yet in the water, it had no equal. The rivers belonged to this crocodile, and everything that approached the banks lived under its shadow. As the Cretaceous shifted, river systems dried and changed, limiting habitats. Competition from other predators and the eventual end Cretaceous extinction finished them off. What makes Sarcosuchus even more fascinating is the reminder it gives us of how landscapes change. The deserts of today were once wetlands that could sustain such giants. The bones uncovered in sand dunes tell of a time when rivers were deep and alive with motion. They remind us that even the harshest places on Earth once held abundant life. From the rivers of Cretaceous Africa, our path now flows back to the seas, where another kind of reptile, streamlined and agile, prowled the open waters. With long jaws and bodies stretching to lengths of 50 feet, these were the mosasaurs, the sea dragons of the ancient oceans. In the late Cretaceous period, when the seas covered much of the continents and warm, shallow waters stretched across the globe, the oceans were home to creatures that seemed drawn straight from myth. Among them was a reptile that has come to be known as the true sea dragon, a hunter so perfectly adapted to the water that it dominated nearly every marine environment it entered. This was the mosasaur, a family of predators that could grow to lengths of 50 feet, with bodies built for speed and jaws armed with rows of sharp teeth. Mosasaur fossils have been uncovered on nearly every continent, a sign of how widespread they were during their reign. Their long, streamlined bodies were powered by strong tails that swept side to side in powerful strokes, driving them through the water with the grace of modern whales. Unlike their distant crocodilian relatives, mosasaurs were fully committed to the ocean. Their limbs had evolved into flippers, and their skulls were flexible, with double-hinged jaws that allowed them to swallow prey far larger than their heads suggested. They were not just reptiles that swam, they were reptiles transformed by evolution into the masters of the sea. Inside the fossils of mosasaurs, Paleontologists have found the remains of their last meals. In some cases, the preserved bones of sharks have been discovered in their stomach cavities. These findings reveal that mosasaurs did not merely compete with other large predators, they consumed them. Sharks that had once held dominance in earlier oceans became prey for these colossal reptiles. In other specimens, the remains of fish, turtles, and even smaller mosasaurs have been identified, showing that these hunters were opportunistic and capable of feeding on anything they could catch. Their appetite matched their size, and the seas provided them with endless opportunities. Imagine a mosasaur rising out of the dark blue, its body gliding with effortless power, the sunlight scattering across its scaly back as it closed in on a school of fish. With a sudden burst of speed, it could slash through the group, snapping its jaws around multiple victims at once. If a shark crossed its path, the outcome was often the same. The sheer force of its strike and the grip of its curved teeth left little chance for escape. In that world, few animals would have felt safe from the presence of these hunters. The skull of a mosasaur tells us much about its strength. Some species had jaws over 5 feet long, armed with as many as 100 sharp teeth. The roof of the mouth carried additional rows of teeth, angled backward to prevent struggling prey from slipping free. Once a creature was inside the jaws of a mosasaur, its fate was sealed. With a flick of the head and a thrust of its body, the predator would swallow its catch whole, leaving nothing behind but silence in the water. The dominance of the mosasaurs was tied to the unique conditions of the late Cretaceous seas. Vast inland oceans stretch through regions that are dry land today, from the interior of North America to parts of Europe and Africa. These waters supported a rich ecosystem of fish, ammonites, marine reptiles, and early seabirds. Within this world, mosasaurs rose to the very top, unmatched in size and ferocity. Their success was rapid, for in evolutionary terms, they appeared and spread quickly, filling every niche of the ocean with different species, from smaller, swift hunters to giants that rivaled the length of modern whales. But even creatures of such power were not immune to the larger patterns of Earth's history. Around 66 million years ago, at the close of the Cretaceous period, a cataclysmic event brought their story to an end. The same extinction that ended the reign of the non-avian dinosaurs on land also swept through the oceans. The giant reptiles, along with many other marine species, vanished from the seas. The fossils left behind, pressed into stone, are the final traces of a dynasty that once ruled the water with unchallenged dominance. From the wide inland seas where mosasaurs hunted sharks, our journey drifts upward into the skies of the same era, where wings spanned as wide as small airplanes and creatures walked on land tall enough to look a giraffe in the eye before taking flight. These were the pterosaurs, and among them one stood above all, Quetzalcoatlus, the flying giant. In the late Cretaceous skies, when dinosaurs still roamed the land below, there lived a creature so astonishing in size that even modern birds seem fragile in comparison. This was Quetzalcoatlus, the flying giant, a pterosaur that stretched the limits of what flight could achieve. With wings that reached close to 30 feet across, it was the largest flying animal ever known, a being that could cast a shadow longer than a small airplane as it glided silently through the air. To stand beside one of these giants would have been like standing beside a giraffe. Fossil evidence suggests that when upright on the ground, Quetzalcoatlus could reach heights of 15 to 18 feet, taller than nearly any other predator in its ecosystem. Its long neck arched above its slender body, topped with a sharp beak that extended like a lance. This beak was not filled with teeth, but its pointed shape made it a precise tool for striking at prey. Scientists believe it may have been an ambush predator, stalking quietly across open plains and riverbanks, waiting to lunge at unsuspecting small dinosaurs. A quick thrust of its head, and the beak would deliver a swift, fatal strike. The fossils of Quetzalcoatlus were discovered in what is now Texas, a land that was once part of a warm coastal plain near the edge of an inland sea. The remains tell us that this giant was part of a broader group of pterosaurs, the Azhdarchids, known for their enormous wings and unusually long necks. Unlike the smaller pterosaurs that fed on fish while skimming across the surface of the water, Quetzalcoatlus seems to have lived more like a land-based hunter, striding across open spaces on its tall, stilt-like legs, ready to seize reptiles, mammals, or hatchlings in its powerful beak. To imagine its flight is to picture something that seems almost impossible. With a body so large, how could such a creature lift itself into the air? The secret lay in its anatomy. Its bones were lightweight and filled with air spaces, reducing its weight while still providing strength. The wings were not like those of birds, but vast membranes of skin stretched between elongated fingers, reinforced by muscle and tendon. Launching into the sky, it may have used all four limbs, pushing itself upward in a vaulting leap before catching the wind with its enormous wings. Once airborne, it could soar for long distances, carried by thermal currents rising from the hot ground. From above, Quetzalcoatlus would have had a vantage point unmatched by any other predator. With keen eyesight, it could scan the land for movement, watching herds of dinosaurs crossing the plains or small animals scurrying below. When the opportunity presented itself, it could descend swiftly, fold its wings, and land with surprising grace for something of its size. On the ground, its towering frame and long stride gave it a commanding presence, a shadow of inevitability to any creature caught within reach. The scale of Quetzalcoatlus challenges the imagination, a wingspan longer than the height of most houses, a body as tall as a giraffe, a beak sharp enough to pierce flesh and long enough to strike from a distance. In its world, it was not only a marvel of evolution, but also a reminder of how far life can stretch the limits of design. Its very existence shows that flight can be achieved even on a scale we might think impossible. The deserts of Texas, where its fossils were found, preserve more than bones. They preserve a glimpse into an ancient ecosystem where the skies were ruled by giants. To walk across those open plains and look up would have been to see shapes that blurred the line between bird, reptile, and something altogether otherworldly. From the towering figure of Quetzalcoatlus striding across ancient shores, the story of prehistoric predators continues to move into stranger forms. Beneath the waters of ancient rivers lurked creatures no less formidable, armored and clawed, with bodies that stretched as long as men. Among them was Jaekelopterus, the great river scorpion, a monster of freshwater realms. In the deep past, long before dinosaurs walked across the land, rivers and lakes shimmered under ancient skies. These waters were alive with fish in heavy armor, with strange amphibians that had only just begun to test the boundary between water and land. Among them lurked a creature that would have seemed like a nightmare from a forgotten age. This was Jaekelopterus, the largest of the sea scorpions, a predator that could grow to lengths of 8 or 9 feet, its body gliding through dark currents in silence. To stumble upon such a creature in the shallows would have been to meet a monster face to face, one that belonged entirely to the rivers, yet seemed larger than life itself. The remains of Jaekelopterus tell its story with startling clarity. Among the fossils, scientists uncovered claws stretching over 18 inches long, These claws were armed with serrated edges, not built for gentle grasping, but for seizing and tearing. With such weapons, the scorpion could lunge at prey and hold it fast, dragging it into its crushing embrace. Its body was covered in a tough exoskeleton, segmented and jointed, allowing both protection and agility. Each section of its body shimmered in ancient waters, reflecting light as it moved with surprising speed. Unlike the smaller scorpions we know today, Jaekelopterus ruled aquatic worlds. It prowled freshwater rivers and lakes, claiming them as its hunting grounds. These environments were filled with armored fish that carried plates of bone for protection, yet even such defenses often proved useless against a predator of this scale. Jaekelopterus could overpower fish with a sudden strike, using its claws to pry through armor and pull apart flesh. It also fed on the earliest amphibians, creatures that still relied on water but were beginning to edge onto land. In these early experiments of evolution, Jaekelopterus found meals that were slow and vulnerable compared to its strength. The size of Jaekelopterus was unlike almost any other invertebrate that has ever existed. To stand beside it would have been to see a scorpion longer than a grown man, its claws rising to chest height, its body stretching across the length of a dining table. Imagine wading into a river and finding one of these giants, sweeping through the water, legs paddling, tail trailing behind. It would have been a vision of dominance, a reminder that long before vertebrates took control of the land, the invertebrates had their own age of supremacy. The world of the Devonian period, when Jaekelopterus thrived, was a place of transition. Plants had spread across the land, turning barren soil into green landscapes. Fish were diversifying, giving rise to forms that would eventually crawl onto land and take their first breaths of air. Yet, even as vertebrates began this great journey, invertebrates like Jaekelopterus still held power in their watery homes. It was one of the apex predators of its time, proof that life could reach extraordinary sizes in forms we rarely imagine today. The thought of rivers ruled by scorpions the size of crocodiles is almost too strange to believe, yet the fossil record makes it clear. In the rocks of Germany, where their remains were uncovered, the outlines of claws and body plates show that these monsters were not myth. They were hunters that thrived in silence, chasing armored fish through murky waters and seizing amphibians before they could crawl fully onto land. The rise of creatures like Jaekelopterus also hints at how different Earth's past atmosphere was. Oxygen levels during parts of the Devonian were higher than they are today, allowing invertebrates to grow far larger than modern air and water would permit. The very air and water of that time created conditions for giants, and Jaekelopterus was one of its most spectacular results. Jaekelopterus declined as fish and early amphibians became faster and better armored. Shifting freshwater ecosystems and competition drove them to extinction. And as we leave the ancient lakes and streams where these scorpions reigned, the story turns again to the seas, where another predator evolved jaws stranger still, lined not with plates or teeth, but with a spiral that cut through water like a buzzsaw. This was Helicoprion, the shark with the jaw of a circular saw. In the ancient seas of the early Permian period, long before the first dinosaurs rose to dominance, swam a creature so strange that even now it feels like a puzzle only half solved. Its body has been lost to time, leaving behind only its most extraordinary feature, a jaw unlike any other ever seen in the history of life. This was Helicoprion, a shark-like predator whose mouth carried a spiral of teeth that curled inward like the blade of a buzzsaw. At first glance, the fossil of this jaw looks impossible, a coil of sharp teeth, stacked one upon the other, forming a perfect spiral that sits where a lower jaw should be. For decades, paleontologists debated what such a feature could mean. Early scientists imagined it as a wheel of teeth protruding from the mouth, perhaps even turning like a weapon. Others believed it might have rested along the back or been used like a saw on the snout, but with more detailed studies, the mystery began to clear. The spiral sat in the lower jaw, a continuous conveyor of sharp teeth, new ones forming at the back and rolling forward as the old ones dulled, locking into place in the coil. This spiral of cutting edges made Helicoprion unlike any predator before or since. While modern sharks lose their teeth and replace them in rows, Helicoprion never discarded its old blades. Instead, they were preserved in the coil, recording a lifetime of growth like the rings of a tree. Some fossils show spirals with over 100 teeth, each one honed into a curved dagger. With this structure, Helicoprion could slice through the soft bodies of squid and other cephalopods, its preferred prey. The oceans of 250 million years ago were different from the seas we know now. They were filled with ammonites, squid-like creatures in coiled shells, as well as early relatives of modern cuttlefish. These were the meals Helicoprion hunted. Its buzzsaw jaw could shear and shred, pulling soft prey into its mouth where it was swallowed whole. Unlike predators that specialized in crushing bone, Helicoprion thrived on the abundant soft-bodied animals that filled the seas of its time. What makes Helicoprion especially mysterious is how little of it has survived in the fossil record. Teeth, made of hard enamel, endure, but cartilage, which made up much of its skeleton, does not fossilize well. As a result, we know far more about its jaws than about the rest of its body. Scientists have reconstructed it as a shark-like fish, streamlined for swimming, perhaps growing to lengths of 20 feet or more, but the exact shape will never be fully certain. Each new fossil discovery provides hints, but leaves many questions unanswered. Was it slender like some modern sharks, or bulkier, with a body closer to that of chimeras? How exactly did it close its jaw around prey, and what movements drew those teeth across flesh? These mysteries remain part of its allure. The story of Helicoprion is also tied to one of Earth's greatest catastrophes. Around 250 million years ago, the Permian extinction swept through the planet, wiping out nearly all marine life. This event ended the reign of countless species, from trilobites to enormous reef builders, and Helicoprion was among the victims. Its unique buzzsaw mouth vanished with it, leaving only scattered fossils hidden in layers of stone. To hold one of those fossil spirals in your hand is to feel a connection to a predator so strange it borders on the unreal, a coil of teeth, sharp as knives, turning endlessly in a frozen spiral. It is a glimpse into the inventiveness of evolution, a reminder that life has experimented with forms far beyond anything we see today. And as the seas shifted, as ancient scorpions vanished from rivers and new predators rose in the oceans, Helicoprion's place was taken by others, yet its jaw remains one of the most astonishing clues in the fossil record. From the mystery of a spiral jaw in ancient seas, the journey now returns to South America, where rivers and swamps once shook under the weight of another reptilian giant. This was Purussaurus, the Amazon crocodile, whose bite force was among the greatest the earth has ever known. In the lush heart of South America, during the Miocene epoch, long before the Amazon River carved the paths we know today, there lived a predator so immense that even the forests seemed too small to contain it. This was Purussaurus, a crocodile of staggering size, an apex predator that turned the wetlands and floodplains into its personal hunting ground. Its length stretched close to 40 feet from snout to tail, and its body weighed nearly 8 tons. It was not simply larger than the crocodiles we see today, It was a giant among giants, a living fortress of muscle, bone, and teeth. The skull of Purussaurus alone measured more than 5 feet in length, and it held a jaw of extraordinary power. Scientists studying its fossils have estimated that its bite force reached nearly 15,000 pounds, a pressure far greater than that of any modern predator. To place that into perspective, such force could crush the thick shells of giant turtles with ease, or splinter the bones of mammals that strayed too close to the water's edge. Once its jaws closed, there was no escape. The sheer weight and crushing power of this reptile gave it mastery over nearly every creature in its environment. The Miocene world of northern South America was rich with life. Giant rodents the size of small cows grazed along the riverbanks. Enormous turtles, some with shells longer than a human is tall, drifted lazily through slow-moving channels. Herds of mammals moved across open plains that stretched into the distance. All of these creatures fell within the reach of Purussaurus. Fossil evidence suggests that it preyed on whatever it could overpower, including these giant rodents, the massive turtles, and perhaps even other crocodilians. The rivers and wetlands were hunting grounds, and the dominance of this reptile meant that few dared to challenge it. To imagine Purussaurus in its natural setting is to imagine a world alive with sound and movement. The air was heavy with humidity. Dense forests crowded the edges of rivers, their branches buzzing with insects and the calls of early birds. In the murky shallows, Purussaurus would lie in silence, its massive body concealed beneath the water, its nostrils just breaking the surface. The stillness was deceptive. At the right moment, when prey ventured close, the giant would erupt with terrifying speed. A burst of motion, a spray of water, and in a single violent strike the animal was dragged into the depths, pinned by a force too great to resist. The discovery of Purussaurus fossils in the Amazon basin paints a picture of how immense the wetlands once were. These crocodiles did not live in small, quiet rivers. They inhabited sprawling waterways that carried the weight of entire ecosystems. Their presence shows that South America's ancient rivers supported not only abundance, but also size on a scale we rarely see today. The very existence of Purussaurus suggests a land overflowing with food, capable of sustaining predators of unimaginable strength. Its size also raises questions about its life. How did a crocodile so enormous move across its environment? What kind of energy demands came with such a body? It likely spent much of its time resting in water, conserving strength, and ambushing prey rather than chasing it. Its bulk alone would have made long pursuits difficult, but stealth and sudden bursts of violence gave it every advantage it needed. Its environment offered patience as a strategy, and Purussaurus used it with deadly efficiency. The fossils of this predator remind us of a South America that was wilder and stranger than we often imagine. Rivers cut through lands filled with creatures that no longer exist. Forests rang with the calls of animals we will never hear. Among them, Purussaurus was a constant shadow, a presence that shaped the behavior of everything around it. Smaller creatures may have avoided riverbanks. Herds may have moved cautiously when approaching the water, and even other predators would have kept their distance. Purussaurus likely vanished due to climate change in the late Miocene as wetlands shrank, rivers shifted, and prey populations declined. From the silent ambushes of Purussaurus in ancient Amazonian rivers, the story of crocodilian power continues. Far to the north, another giant of similar strength ruled the waterways of North America, where its jaws left marks on the very bones of dinosaurs. This was Deinosuchus, the crocodile that hunted among giants of the land. In the warm and humid landscapes of late Cretaceous North America, rivers wound their way across wide floodplains, carrying with them both life and danger. Along these ancient waterways lived a reptile so immense and powerful that even the dinosaurs themselves were not safe when they approached the water's edge. This predator was Deinosuchus, a crocodilian whose very name means terrible crocodile, and it earned that title in every sense. Stretching from 30 to nearly 40 feet in length, Deinosuchus was among the largest crocodilian relatives ever to exist. Its body was an armored fortress of scales, thick and ridged, built to withstand both attack and the violent struggles of prey. Its jaws, lined with conical teeth, were not built for slicing like the jaws of theropod dinosaurs, but for gripping with unrelenting force. Once its jaws closed, escape was nearly impossible. The most striking evidence of its hunting power comes not from its skeleton alone, but from the marks it left behind. Fossils of hadrosaurs and other dinosaurs bear deep punctures and crushed bones that match the size and shape of Deinosuchus' teeth. These bite marks are silent testimony that this giant crocodile hunted and fed on land-dwelling dinosaurs that strayed too close to the rivers. Imagine a duck-billed dinosaur lowering its head to drink, unaware of the silent shape lurking beneath the water, until in a sudden explosion of force it was dragged down into the current, its cries drowned out by the rush of water and the closing of jaws as strong as steel traps. The rivers that Deinosuchus ruled were filled with life. Herds of hadrosaurs, with their long crests and duck-like bills, migrated across the land in groups that filled the plains. Tyrannosaurs prowled as apex predators of the dry ground, hunting with speed and strategy. But in the water, the tyrant's rule ended. Here, Deinosuchus was the king. Even a tyrannosaur approaching the river would have had reason for caution, for although Deinosuchus may not have been able to chase such a predator on land, the boundary where river met shore was its domain. Its world was vast. Fossils of Deinosuchus have been uncovered across much of North America, from Montana to Texas, from the Atlantic coast to the inland seas that once split the continent in two. This wide range suggests that it thrived in many environments, from swampy deltas to coastal marshes. Wherever there was fresh water and prey, Deinosuchus could find a home. The abundance of food in these habitats allowed it to reach immense size, larger than almost any modern crocodilian. The anatomy of Deinosuchus tells us that it shared many traits with crocodiles we know today, yet on a far greater scale. Its limbs were short and powerful, perfect for lunging in bursts of speed, while its tail acted as a muscular propeller, driving it forward with sudden violence. Unlike fish or marine reptiles, Deinosuchus relied on stealth. It would lie motionless, hidden beneath the water's surface, until the right moment came. In that instant, all patience was released as raw strength, and the predator seized its victim before pulling it into the depths. Deinosuchus went extinct by the end of the Cretaceous as sea levels dropped and ecosystems changed, eliminating its habitats and food sources. The late Cretaceous was an age of giants, and Deinosuchus held its place among them. Sharing its world with towering dinosaurs, enormous turtles, and even marine reptiles in the nearby seas, it stood as a reminder that dominance is not confined to the land. For nearly 10 million years it persisted, shaping the ecosystems of rivers across the continent, leaving behind scars and bone that still speak of its reign. From these shadowed riverbanks, where Deinosuchus lurked in silence, the story of ancient predators shifts once more, to the oceans of a time even older, where the first great hunters were not reptiles or mammals, but strange and alien forms that looked like no creature alive today. These were the Anomalocarids, and among them was Anomalocaris, the earliest super predator of the seas. 500 million years ago, Long before dinosaurs thundered across the land or sharks prowled the seas, the world belonged to creatures that would look utterly alien to us today. The Cambrian oceans were brimming with new life as evolution experimented with forms that had never existed before. Out of this strange and shifting world rose the first great predator that Earth had ever known, a creature that hunted with tools unlike anything that would ever appear again. Its name was Anomalocaris, which means unusual shrimp, though it was neither shrimp nor fish, but something altogether unique, a design that vanished with its time. Anomalocaris stretched up to 3 feet in length, making it enormous compared to most of its neighbors in those early seas. To understand why this size mattered, it is important to remember that much of life then was still tiny, creatures measured in inches or less. Trilobites, small armored animals that scuttled across the seafloor, were among the dominant groups. Worms burrowed in sediments, soft-bodied creatures drifted with the currents, and sponges clung to rocky surfaces. In such a world, Anomalocaris was a giant, a shadow that moved above smaller animals, its strange body unlike anything we might imagine for a predator. Its most striking features were the 2 long appendages that extended from the front of its body. Each was jointed and spined, able to sweep forward and seize prey, bringing it toward the creature's mouth. These were not claws in the way a crab uses its pincers, but flexible tools capable of grabbing, pulling, and pinning. At the center of its head was a circular mouth, ringed with plates that resembled the petals of a sunflower, only each plate was edged with hard, sharp ridges. The mouth could rotate and close with crushing strength, breaking through the defenses of trilobites and other armored animals. Anomalocaris swam with undulating flaps along the sides of its body, rippling in a wave-like motion that propelled it forward. This method of movement gave it both speed and agility, allowing it to dart after prey or hover while searching for a target. Its large, compound eyes, some of the most advanced of their time, provided keen vision in a world where sight itself was a relatively new advantage. With these tools, Anomalocaris became the apex predator of its age, shaping the Cambrian seas through the fear it inspired and the pressure it placed on other species to evolve defenses. The impact of this predator can still be seen in the fossil record. Trilobites from Cambrian rocks often show scars, bite marks, and even partially healed wounds that match the size and shape of Anomalocaris's circular mouth. These marks tell a story of encounters in shallow seas, of trilobites crushed or pursued, of survival for some and sudden death for many others. The rise of predators like Anomalocaris is thought to have driven one of the most important steps in evolution, the development of shells, spines, and armor as prey species adapted to resist their hunters. The Cambrian world itself was a place of transformation. Roughly 500 million years ago, life was diversifying at an unprecedented pace in what scientists call the Cambrian explosion. New body plans, new ways of feeding, and new methods of movement all appeared within a relatively short span of time. Anomalocaris stood at the center of this explosion, embodying the role of predator for the first time on Earth. Its success and its dominance were part of the forces that pushed evolution into overdrive, as survival demanded both innovation and adaptation. Yet even the first super predator was not immune to change. Toward the end of the Cambrian period, Anomalocaris and its kin disappeared from the fossil record. Shifts in climate, the restructuring of marine ecosystems, and the rise of new competitors may have ended their reign. In their place, other predators began to take shape, building on the foundations that Anomalocaris had laid. Though it vanished, its influence continued, for it had altered the very fabric of life in the seas. From the alien form of Anomalocaris, with its grasping arms and spinning mouth, we can trace the beginnings of the predator-prey arms race that has defined so much of evolution. And as its shadow faded from the Cambrian waters, other strange hunters took their place, including creatures that looked like massive scorpions swimming through Paleozoic seas. Among them was Terrorotus, a giant sea scorpion that grew longer than a man, a predator that carried the torch of dominance into the ages that followed. In the Paleozoic seas, hundreds of millions of years before the rise of dinosaurs, there lived creatures that blurred the line between nightmare and reality. Among them was Terrorotus, a giant sea scorpion that stretched to nearly 8 feet in length, longer than many grown humans are tall. To picture such an animal moving through shallow waters is to imagine a world both alien and familiar, where creatures we now know only in miniature once grew to monstrous proportions. Terrorotus belonged to a group known as Eurypterids, ancient relatives of modern horseshoe crabs and scorpions. Unlike the horseshoe crabs that still scuttle quietly along sandy beaches today, Terrorotus was built for predation. Its body was armored with a segmented exoskeleton, and its legs allowed it to swim and crawl across the seafloor with ease. Most striking of all were its claws, large and powerful, tipped with sharp edges that left fossil evidence of their strength. These claws were not simply tools for grasping, they were weapons, built to seize, to crush, and to tear. The seas of the Silurian and Devonian periods, when Terrorotus thrived, were brimming with life. Early fishes, some armored with bony plates, filled the waters. Trilobites crawled across the seabed, their ridged shells offering protection against many threats. Primitive sharks and other eurypterids swam through open shallows, all part of a diverse ecosystem that was still experimenting with new forms. Within this world, Terrorotus was an apex predator. Its eyes, large and compound, would have given it a wide view of its surroundings, sensitive to the slightest flicker of movement. Once prey came within range, Terrorotus could lunge with startling speed, its claws snapping shut with precision and force. The sheer scale of this creature is what makes it so fascinating. To see a scorpion of such size gliding through the water would have been unsettling, for it transforms something we know today as small and harmless into a giant capable of overpowering fish. The fossilized claws alone, sometimes found detached from the rest of the body, give a sense of their immense power. Some show wear patterns that suggest repeated use in gripping and crushing, as though these tools bore the scars of a lifetime of hunting. In these marks, paleontologists read the story of a predator that did not hesitate to use its weapons again and again. Although Terrorotus may have been able to swim with its broad, paddle-like limbs, it was likely an ambush hunter. Concealed along the seabed or among plants in shallow waters, it may have waited patiently until a fish swam too close. Then, with a sudden surge of movement, it could grab its victim and drag it into its waiting mouth. Its strategy may have been similar to modern crocodiles in rivers or mantis shrimp in tropical reefs, relying on bursts of speed rather than long pursuits. What gave it the edge was its size, for few animals in its environment could match its reach or strength. The body plan of Terrorotus, with its armored plates and jointed limbs, speaks to a time when invertebrates were among the rulers of the seas. Before the dominance of large fish and marine reptiles, creatures like sea scorpions were the undisputed giants. Their reign shows how different the balance of power in the oceans once was, and how evolution has shifted the crown of dominance from one lineage to another over deep time. To walk the seafloor of that age, had it been possible, would have meant sharing space with Terrorotus and others of its kind. Imagine wading into waist-high water, only to see a shadow larger than your own body sliding past, its armored shell glinting in filtered light. Its claws would stretch outward, searching, ready to seize. Though alien to us, it was perfectly adapted to its time, its every feature shaped by the ancient seas that sustained it. Terrorotus declined as oceans changed in the late Devonian, with rising competition from early fish and shifting marine ecosystems. From these shallow waters filled with armored scorpions and the first great fishes, life continued its restless march, shaping predators of new kinds. And as the age of sea scorpions began to fade, the land would eventually give rise to strange mammals of enormous size, creatures like Andrewsarchus, a wolf-skulled hunter that once roamed the plains of Mongolia. On the windswept plains of Eocene Mongolia, some 40 million years ago, a strange and formidable mammal walked the earth. It was neither a cat nor a dog, neither a bear nor a hyena, yet it carried traits that echoed all of these hunters. This was Andrewsarchus, a creature that remains one of the most mysterious giants in the history of mammals. Its reputation begins with its skull, a massive bone structure over 3 feet in length, discovered weathered and buried in the rocks of Mongolia by the famed paleontologist Roy Chapman Andrews, the man whose name it now bears. That skull tells us much about what kind of animal Andrewsarchus was, and also what it was not. Its jaws were long and narrow, built not for delicate bites but for crushing. The teeth were varied, some sharp and cutting, others blunt and strong, designed to grind and smash. The sheer scale of the skull suggests that the body it belonged to could have been the largest land-dwelling carnivorous mammal ever known, perhaps stretching over 12 feet from nose to tail and weighing over 1,000 pounds. Imagine an animal with the bulk of a modern horse, but carrying the head of a predator larger than any wolf. The landscape Andrewsarchus lived in was a world in transition. The Eocene epoch was a time of warmth when forests and grasslands spread across Asia, herds of primitive horses, early pigs, and strange hornless relatives of sheep and cattle grazed the open fields. Turtles and crocodiles lingered near waterways, and birds of prey circled above. In such an environment, Andrewsarchus would have had no shortage of opportunities. It may have been a hunter, capable of bringing down weaker or slower animals, but it was also likely a scavenger, using its powerful jaws to crack open bones and feast on carcasses left behind by other predators. Its teeth, shaped for both tearing and crushing, tell us that it could shift between roles, surviving on whatever food the land provided. The skull also carries hints of ancestry. For a long time, scientists debated whether Andrewsarchus was related to wolves or bears, but the details of its bone structure suggest a surprising link. It was likely part of a group called mesonychids, hoofed mammals distantly related to whales and hippos. This lineage reminds us how tangled evolution can be, how creatures that look like wolves may be closer in family to animals that swim in oceans today. Andrewsarchus was one branch of this long and winding tree, one that grew immense before vanishing. To picture Andrewsarchus in motion is to imagine a powerful, long-legged animal moving with the steady stride of a predator built for endurance. Its sense of smell would have been keen, guiding it to the scent of a carcass or the trail of prey across wide plains. Once it found its target, it would have lowered its massive head, jaws parting to reveal teeth ready to crush bone or tear flesh. A single bite could splinter the leg of a smaller ungulate or break open the shell of a large turtle. In this way, Andrewsarchus shaped its ecosystem, both as a threat to the living and a recycler of the dead. The fossil record of this giant is frustratingly sparse. Beyond its famous skull, little of its skeleton has ever been found. That absence leaves paleontologists to reconstruct its body from related species, filling in the gaps with educated guesses. Was it heavily built, lumbering with sheer size, or more lightly framed, capable of bursts of speed? Did it hunt in packs or stalk alone? These questions linger, unanswered, leaving Andrewsarchus shrouded in mystery, even as its skull speaks to its scale and strength. Yet this mystery only adds to its presence. A massive mammal with a wolf-like head roaming the open plains of Asia stands as a symbol of how strange and powerful the world of mammals once was. Where today the largest carnivores on land are bears and big cats, in the Eocene it was Andrewsarchus that ruled, a reminder that the age of mammals has carried giants as fearsome as any reptile that came before. It went extinct during the Oligocene, likely from environmental changes that reduced prey and competition with other carnivorous mammals. And from the dry grasslands of Mongolia, where Andrewsarchus once left its tracks, the story turns again to the oceans, where early whales took on shapes so elongated and serpentine that they seemed more like sea serpents than the ancestors of today's dolphins. Among them was Basilosaurus, the serpent whale that ruled the seas. 50 million years ago, in the warm seas of the Eocene epoch, an extraordinary creature moved through the water with the grace of a serpent and the power of a giant. This was Basilosaurus, one of the earliest whales, though its name means king lizard because the scientists who first studied its fossils mistook it for a reptile. It is easy to see why. Unlike the whales we know today, Basilosaurus had a body so long and narrow that it resembled a snake more than a mammal, stretching close to 50 feet in length. Its skeleton reveals a body designed for a very different style of swimming than that of modern whales. Instead of moving its tail up and down in strong vertical strokes, as dolphins and whales do now, Basilosaurus rippled its entire body from side to side, more like an eel. Its elongated vertebrae, each one stretched far longer than in other mammals, gave it a sinuous, flowing shape. To imagine this giant is to picture a creature as long as a city bus, its sleek form weaving through shallow seas, its long skull cutting forward like the prow of a ship. The head of Basilosaurus was narrow, armed with sharp, pointed teeth in the front and serrated molars in the back. These teeth tell the story of its diet. Basilosaurus hunted fish, large sharks, and even smaller whales, making it one of the top predators of its time. Fossilized remains of other marine mammals have been found with bite marks that match its jaws, showing that it was not a gentle giant, but a ruler of the sea that fed on anything it could overpower. Its jaws could slice and crush, leaving little chance for escape once it struck. Basilosaurus fossils have been discovered in both North America and Egypt, painting a picture of a world where warm seas stretched far across continents. In Egypt's desert, in a place called Wadi al-Hitan, or the Valley of the Whales, the bones of dozens of Basilosaurus lie preserved in sand that was once ocean floor. Here, the skeletons are so complete and so numerous that they tell us not only about the creature itself, but also about the seas it ruled. In ancient North America, fossils found in Mississippi and Alabama show that this predator swam in shallow tropical waters that once covered much of the continent. The wide distribution of its fossils suggests that Basilosaurus was a successful and adaptable hunter, capable of thriving across oceans. Despite its dominance, Basilosaurus was not built like modern whales. Its body, though long, was narrow and fragile compared to the robust forms of today's giants. This suggests it may not have been able to dive deeply or withstand powerful ocean currents. Instead, It likely patrolled shallow coastal seas, where prey was abundant and where its elongated body gave it speed and agility in bursts. It was not a fast swimmer over long distances, but a predator that relied on ambush, attacking with sudden violence when schools of fish or smaller marine mammals crossed its path. One of the most fascinating details of Basilosaurus is that it still carried tiny hind limbs, remnants of its land-dwelling ancestors. These legs were far too small to be useful for walking, dangling uselessly near its pelvis, but they were a reminder of the journey whales were taking during this time. From four-legged mammals that once walked on land to fully aquatic hunters like Basilosaurus, the story of whales is one of the most remarkable transformations in evolutionary history. These vestigial legs were clues written in bone, showing that Basilosaurus stood at a crossroads between past and future, part land animal and part whale. To envision Basilosaurus swimming in its shallow seas is to glimpse a world in transition. The oceans echoed with the calls of early whales, filled with shoals of fish, swarms of sharks, and reefs teeming with life. Above, the skies were warm, and continents looked very different than they do today. Within this changing world, Basilosaurus glided like a serpent, striking with precision, ruling its waters until the seas themselves shifted. Basilosaurus disappeared as climate shifts favored smaller, faster whales better adapted to new hunting strategies. From the snake-like body of Basilosaurus, the story of prehistoric skies calls us next, to wings that stretched wider than any bird alive today. High above the pampas of ancient Argentina soared Argentavis, the giant sky hunter whose shadow covered the ground as it drifted for hours without rest. High above the windswept pampas of ancient Argentina, a shadow once stretched across the grasslands so wide that it could have swallowed a herd of animals in its outline. This was Argentavis magnificens, the greatest flying bird that ever lived, a creature whose wings spanned nearly 23 feet from tip to tip. To see it in the sky would have been to watch a moving wall of feathers, a living glider drifting effortlessly over the plains, its enormous wings catching every rising current of warm air. Argentavis lived around 6 million years ago, long after the age of dinosaurs, but still in a world of giants. On the ground below, it moved herds of strange mammals, some towering like camels, others grazing low to the earth. Predators prowled among them, but in the sky Argentavis ruled alone. With a body as heavy as a human adult and wings wider than the length of a small aircraft, it was built not for flapping endlessly, but for soaring. Its bones were hollow and strong, light enough to lift such size, and its muscles were shaped for taking advantage of thermals, the invisible columns of warm air that rise from heated land. Once aloft, Argentavis may have flown for hours without rest. The pampas, with their wide-open spaces and shifting winds, offered the perfect environment for such flight. Like a vulture, it may have spent long hours searching for the signs of death, the still body of a fallen animal, or the commotion of smaller scavengers gathering around a carcass. But fossils and studies suggest that Argentavis was not only a scavenger. Its sharp beak and strong legs point to a hunter as well, capable of swooping down upon small mammals, tearing them apart with a strike of its hooked bill. Rabbits, rodents, or the young of larger species could all have fallen victim to its sudden descent. The mechanics of its hunting are still debated. Did it dive like an eagle striking with speed, or did it use its weight to pin prey to the ground, pecking and tearing until the fight ended? Either way, there was little chance of escape once Argentavis locked onto its target. A bird of such size carried not only power, but also authority over its environment. Other predators, whether on the ground or in the sky, would have thought twice before challenging it for a meal. The fossils of Argentavis, discovered in Argentina's La Pampa region, offer glimpses of this bird's immense proportions. Wing bones longer than a person's arm and skull fragments shaped for gripping and tearing speak to its dominance in the air. From these remains, paleontologists have reconstructed a picture of an animal that combined the soaring grace of condors with the deadly precision of raptors, magnified to a scale unmatched by anything alive today. To imagine Argentavis in flight is to imagine silence broken only by the rush of wind. With wings spread wide, it would circle higher and higher, scanning the ground with keen eyesight, capable of spotting prey from miles away. Once its eyes fixed on movement below, it would angle its wings, folding slightly to descend in a controlled glide. The final moments of its approach would have been sudden and swift, a rush of feathers and force before its sharp beak delivered the decisive blow. What allowed such a giant to thrive was not just its wings, but the world it inhabited. The grasslands of South America during the Miocene epoch were rich and expansive, filled with prey animals and free of human disturbance. The skies were open, the winds strong, and the thermals steady. It was an environment perfectly suited to a bird that depended on vast distances and endless searching. Argentavis was not built for tight forests or confined spaces. It was a creature of the open world, where the horizon stretched unbroken and the sky itself became its hunting ground. Argentavis became extinct a few million years ago, likely due to climate change in South America that reduced open grasslands and prey populations. From the image of this colossal bird drifting endlessly above the pampas, our journey continues further back in time, to a period when the air itself allowed giants of another kind to thrive. In the oxygen-rich forests of the Carboniferous, insects grew to sizes almost unimaginable today, and among them were dragonflies with wings wider than a hawk's, the Meganura. In the vast, swampy forests of the Carboniferous period, nearly 300 million years ago, the air was thick and heavy with life. Giant ferns stretched high above the ground, towering club mosses and horsetails created dense green canopies, and the air itself was different from today. Oxygen levels were far higher, filling each breath with a richness that allowed living things to grow to extraordinary sizes. Among this strange ancient world, one creature ruled the skies, a predator that seems almost impossible to imagine now. This was Meganura, a dragonfly so large that its wings stretched wider than 2.5 feet across, making it the size of a modern hawk. Meganura looked much like the dragonflies we know today, with long transparent wings, a narrow segmented body, and enormous compound eyes, but in scale it was something altogether different. When it lifted from the forest floor, its wings glistened in the sunlight as they beat with a speed that filled the air with a low hum. A single insect was suddenly transformed into a creature of astonishing presence, large enough to cast a shadow over the ferns and moss as it drifted above. Its hunting strategy was built for precision. Meganura was a master of aerial control, able to hover in place, dart sideways, or suddenly dive. With its immense compound eyes, each containing thousands of individual lenses, it could detect the smallest movements below. Once it locked onto a target, it lunged forward, its spiny legs snapping out to form a cage that trapped its prey midair. What it caught could range from smaller insects to delicate winged creatures, and perhaps even the tiny amphibians that clambered through the undergrowth of the Carboniferous swamps. For animals of that size, the strike of Meganura would have been inescapable, a sudden death delivered from the sky. The secret behind the size of Meganura lies in the very air it breathed. During the Carboniferous period, Oxygen levels were far higher than in the modern atmosphere, reaching levels of more than 30% compared to today's 21. Insects breathe not with lungs, but through a system of tubes that allow oxygen to diffuse directly into their bodies. With oxygen so abundant, the system could sustain much larger body sizes than it can today. The air itself became a kind of fuel, enabling creatures like Meganura to grow to a scale no insect could reach in the modern world. The forests it inhabited were no less strange. Towering lycophytes, some over 100 feet tall, stretched skyward, their trunks rising like green pillars. The ground was damp with shallow pools where amphibians wriggled, some no larger than a hand, others growing to several feet long. Insects of all kinds filled the air, some of them giants in their own right. Millipedes as long as cars crawled across the forest floor, while other winged insects buzzed in clouds above. In this dense and humid world, Meganura had no rivals in the sky. It was the top aerial predator, unmatched in agility and scale. To see one of these giants gliding through the trees would have been both beautiful and unsettling. Its wings, delicate yet powerful, carried it effortlessly, each beat flashing light through the forest canopy. Its body gleamed with dark metallic colors, and its eyes shone like polished gems, watching for the faintest twitch of movement below. When it dived, there was little more than a blur before its legs closed around its prey, and then it was gone again, circling high above. Yet even such giants were tied to the fragile balance of their environment. As the Carboniferous period ended, climates shifted, forests changed, and oxygen levels dropped. The conditions that had allowed insects to grow to impossible sizes vanished, and with them, the reign of Meganura came to an end. Smaller dragonflies and insects continued, but none would ever again reach the scale of this hawk-sized hunter of the swamps. From these immense dragonflies gliding silently through the Carboniferous skies, the story of Earth's past turns once more toward the ground, where mammals rose to sizes equally astonishing. Towering above the forests and plains, there walked sloths as large as elephants, slow-moving yet powerful, armed with claws capable of fending off the fiercest of Ice Age predators. These were the Megatherium, the elephant-sized sloths that ruled South America. On the open plains and in the woodlands of South America, during the Ice Age, there moved a creature so large and unusual that to witness it would have felt like stepping into a dream. This was Megatherium, the great ground sloth, a giant that stretched nearly 20 feet from nose to tail and weighed close to 4 tons. Unlike the sloths we know today, slow and small, clinging quietly to the branches of trees, Megatherium was a colossus of the land, walking heavily across the ground on massive limbs, its body casting a shadow that rivaled elephants. Its size alone would have been astonishing, but what made Megatherium even more remarkable was the paradox of its nature. It was a herbivore, feeding on plants, shrubs, and low-hanging branches, yet it carried weapons that looked as though they belonged to a predator. From its forelimbs extended claws more than a foot long, curved and sharp, built to hook, tear, and rake. These claws were not for killing prey, but for pulling down branches, stripping bark, and defending itself from the many dangers of the Pleistocene world. In a confrontation, those claws could strike with devastating force, and predators learned caution when approaching the giant sloth. When threatened, Megatherium could rear back on its powerful hind legs, balancing with the help of its massive tail like a third pillar of support. Rising to full height, it could tower over many of the predators that dared to test it. Saber-toothed cats, with their long, knife-like fangs, may have seen the giant sloth as potential prey, but a swipe of those claws could cripple even such fierce hunters. Fossils suggest that these confrontations happened often, and in some cases, Megatherium may have fought off attacks that would have ended the lives of smaller animals. The power it held in its bulk, combined with its weapons, made it far more than a gentle plant eater. The world it inhabited was a landscape alive with giants. Herds of mammoths moved across the plains, armored glyptodonts with their domed shells grazed nearby, and packs of dire wolves worked together to bring down their quarry. In this company, Megatherium stood out for its sheer oddity. Slow, massive, and heavily built, it did not chase or flee, but instead relied on size and strength to claim its place. It fed by reaching vegetation other animals could not, pulling down tree branches and consuming tough plants with its broad, grinding teeth. With its immense appetite, it could reshape patches of woodland, opening clearings and influencing the spread of vegetation. Yet, for all its power, Megatherium's fate was fragile, tied to the shifting climate and the arrival of new and dangerous hunters. As the Ice Age drew to a close, temperatures warmed, glaciers retreated, and ecosystems shifted. The plants that had once fed the giant sloth grew scarce in some areas, replaced by different vegetation less suited to its diet. But perhaps even more significant was the arrival of humans. Fossil sites have revealed evidence of early people butchering the remains of Megatherium, suggesting that hunting played a role in their decline. A creature that was slow to move, despite its formidable claws, may have become a tempting target for coordinated groups of hunters. To imagine the last of the Megatherium is to imagine a lonely figure moving across a changing landscape, vast in size but vulnerable to forces beyond its control. The forests thinned, the plains shifted, and the hunters with their stone tools grew in number. One by one, the giants of South America began to vanish, leaving behind only bones pressed into the earth and stories hidden in the layers of time. And from those plains where sloths the size of elephants once lumbered, we turn further back in time, into the Permian Age, when the ancestors of mammals carried long saber-like teeth, ruling the land long before the rise of dinosaurs. Among them were the Gorgonopsids, predators with fierce jaws and elongated fangs that stood as the saber-tooths of their age. In the Permian period, more than 250 million years ago, the world was alive with strange creatures that seem today like experiments in evolution. Before the first dinosaurs walked the land, the role of apex predator belonged to a different lineage entirely, a group of fearsome hunters known as the Gorgonopsids. Their very name carries the echo of myth, yet they were real, flesh and blood predators that stalked ancient plains and forests long before tyrannosaurs or saber-toothed cats ever existed. A Gorgonopsid could grow up to 10 feet in length, its body carried low to the ground on sturdy limbs, its head large and powerful, with jaws that looked oversized compared to the rest of its frame. Most striking of all were its teeth. From the upper jaw jutted long, curved fangs, sharp and deadly, sabers that could pierce the flesh of its prey. These elongated teeth were so prominent that in some species they reached nearly 6 inches in length, weapons that foreshadowed the saber-toothed predators that would appear many millions of years later. The landscape where Gorgonopsids lived was a harsh and unpredictable one. The continents had drawn together into the great supercontinent Pangaea, creating vast arid regions broken by river systems and seasonal rains. Plants had spread across the land, from primitive conifers to tree ferns, creating pockets of green where life gathered. In these places, herds of large herbivores grazed. Among them were dicynodonts, squat and tusked plant eaters, and parasaurs, lumbering reptiles armored with bony knobs. For the Gorgonopsids, these were meals waiting to be taken. Their bodies were built for the hunt. The long skull housed strong jaw muscles, allowing them to open their mouths wide, delivering deep puncturing bites. Their saber teeth could drive through the tough hides of armored prey, striking with precision at soft spots in the body. Paleontologists believe Gorgonopsids did not merely scavenge, but actively hunted large animals, using ambush and bursts of power. They may have lain in wait along waterholes or the edges of forests, rushing forward when a chance presented itself, their teeth sinking into flesh as claws gripped to hold the struggling prey. The fossils of these predators show adaptations that hint at their place on the evolutionary tree. They were not reptiles in the true sense, though they looked reptilian. Instead, they belonged to a group called therapsids, the very ancestors of mammals. Their jaws and teeth carried traits that would one day appear in mammalian carnivores. Even their limb posture suggests they were beginning to move away from the sprawling gait of reptiles towards something more efficient. In the Gorgonopsids, we see a glimpse of the path that would eventually lead to wolves, lions, and even humans. To imagine meeting one is to picture a hunter with the body of a reptile and the ferocity of a mammal, prowling through a landscape both alien and familiar. Its eyes would have locked forward, its saber teeth glinting as its heavy breath steamed in the morning air. The silence of the Permian plains would break in an instant as it lunged, sinking those curved fangs into a victim that never saw it coming. For the herbivores of that world, every shadow carried the possibility of such a predator waiting. Yet the reign of the Gorgonopsids, like so many dynasties of the past, was cut short by catastrophe. At the end of the Permian, the Earth experienced the most devastating extinction event in its history. Volcanic eruptions, climate upheaval, and poisoned oceans combined to wipe out the majority of life. The Gorgonopsids, apex predators of their time, disappeared completely, their saber teeth left buried in stone as relics of a vanished world. And as their shadows faded from the Permian landscape, the story of predation did not end. In the lands far to the south, in ancient Australia, evolution would one day shape a new line of hunters, marsupials with bone-crushing jaws and the power to ambush giants. Among them was Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, another predator unlike anything alive today. In the ancient landscapes of Ice Age Australia, where giant kangaroos bounded across open plains and massive wombat-like diprotodons grazed in herds, there lived a predator that carried no equal on the continent. It was not a big cat like the lions of Africa, nor a wolf like those of the Northern Hemisphere. It was something uniquely Australian, shaped by evolution in isolation, and it became one of the most formidable hunters of its age. This was Thylacoleo, often called the marsupial lion, though in truth it was unlike any other lion the world has ever known. Thylacoleo was a creature built for power rather than speed. It was about the size of a modern leopard, weighing up to 200 pounds, yet pound for pound it delivered a bite stronger than that of any living mammal predator. Its skull reveals enormous jaw muscles, anchored to bony ridges that gave them leverage and strength. The teeth were specialized in a way unlike any other marsupial, with sharp, blade-like premolars that acted as shears, slicing through flesh and bone with brutal efficiency. This gave Thylacoleo a bone-crushing bite, one that could split through the toughest hides of Ice Age megafauna. Its claws added another layer to its fearsome arsenal. Each forelimb carried retractable claws, a feature rare among marsupials, and the thumb was tipped with an oversized, curved claw that could slash and hold. With these weapons, Thylacoleo was not simply a hunter, but an ambush predator of terrifying skill. Fossils and reconstructions suggest that it may have hidden in trees or dense vegetation, waiting for the right moment to drop or spring upon passing prey. Once it latched on, its jaws would do the rest, locking down with a force that left little chance of escape. The prey it targeted were giants of the Australian Ice Age. Diprotodons, the largest marsupial herbivores ever, could weigh over 2 tons and move in herds across open country. Giant kangaroos, some twice the height of a modern human, grazed on the grasses of the plains. Even giant flightless birds like Geniornis may have fallen victim to Thylacoleo's attacks. Although smaller than these animals, the marsupial lion did not need to overpower them in speed. Its strategy was stealth and sudden violence. A burst of power from its muscular limbs, claws digging in, followed by a devastating bite to the neck or throat, would bring even large animals down. Evidence of its hunting ability can still be read in the fossil record. Marks on bones found in caves show the unmistakable slicing traces of its shearing teeth. Some caves in southern Australia are filled with the remains of animals that may have been dragged inside by Thylacoleo, using the safety of rocky shelters to feed away from scavengers. These caves preserve not just the bones of prey, but also the story of a predator that dominated the continent's ecosystems for hundreds of thousands of years. Australia's wildlife has always carried an air of the unusual, shaped by isolation from other continents. Thylacoleo was a reflection of that uniqueness, a predator that looked nothing like the lions or tigers of other lands, but filled the same role with astonishing success. Its lineage was tied not to cats, but to plant-eating marsupials. Over time, evolution transformed those herbivorous ancestors into one of the most specialized carnivores ever seen. In its skull, in its claws, and in its sheer killing power, it was a predator as strange as it was deadly. Yet even this remarkable hunter could not survive the changes that came at the close of the Ice Age. Shifts in climate reduced the habitats of its prey, and the arrival of humans added new pressures through hunting and competition. As the great diprotodons and other megafauna vanished, so too did the marsupial lion. What remains are fossils, cave marks, and the echoes of a predator that once ruled a land of giants. It went extinct around 40,000 years ago, likely due to human hunting and ecosystem changes that reduced its megafauna prey. From the ambushes of Thylacoleo in ancient Australia, our journey moves back to the oceans, to another reptilian hunter with a skull nearly as long as a man is tall. This was Chronosaurus, the pliosaur whose massive jaws closed around turtles, fish, and anything else that crossed its path in the seas of the Cretaceous. In the vast seas of the early Cretaceous period, nearly 120 million years ago, there lived a predator so immense and so fearsome that it carried the name of a titan from ancient mythology. This was Chronosaurus, a marine reptile that belonged to a group known as pliosaurs. Unlike the long-necked plesiosaurs with their delicate features, pliosaurs were built for brute strength, with massive skulls, muscular bodies, and flippers that propelled them through the water like living engines. Chronosaurus, one of the largest of its kind, stretched nearly 30 feet in length, with a skull alone that measured close to 10 feet, filled with long, sharp teeth designed to pierce and hold struggling prey. To imagine Chronosaurus in motion is to picture a living submarine. Its body was compact, yet powerfully built, its 4 flippers driving it forward in strong strokes, allowing it to glide swiftly through warm coastal seas. Unlike fish, which moved with side-to-side motions, or whales, which rely on up and down movements of their tails, Chronosaurus used its flippers in unison, much like the wings of a bird in water, giving it both speed and agility. With such control, it could maneuver quickly to chase down fast prey, and when it struck, It did so with overwhelming force. The fossil record offers clues about its diet. Stomach contents and bite-marked remains show that Chronosaurus fed on large turtles, fish, and other marine reptiles. Its jaws were perfectly suited to this task. Each tooth, conical and sharp, could lock into slippery prey, and the enormous bite force generated by its skull ensured that shells and bones offered little protection. A single snap of its jaws could crush a turtle's carapace or break the spine of a fish nearly as long as a human. The feeding traces left on fossils are silent evidence of the violence that unfolded beneath the waves when this pliosaur hunted. Yet Chronosaurus was not a creature of endless chase. Its body, though strong, was not built for sustained speed like some modern dolphins. Instead, it likely relied on ambush and short bursts of rapid pursuit. Concealed in deeper waters or along reefs, it could surge forward when prey passed too close. Once caught, escape was nearly impossible. Its teeth interlocked like a trap, and the weight of its body added crushing power to every bite. The seas that Chronosaurus ruled were rich and alive. Coral reefs stretched across warm, shallow oceans, teeming with fish of all shapes and sizes. Schools of smaller reptiles darted between rocks, and giant turtles floated along currents. It was a world of abundance, but also of constant danger, for predators like Chronosaurus turned those same reefs into hunting grounds. Any creature swimming in those waters would have lived under the shadow of the pliosaur's presence, the knowledge that at any moment a shape larger than a boat could surge from the depths. The fossils of Chronosaurus have been found in Australia and South America, telling us that its range was wide, crossing ancient seas that linked continents in ways very different from today. Each skull, each tooth preserved in stone, gives a glimpse of a predator that shaped the ecosystems around it. Its very name, inspired by Kronos, the leader of the Titans, reflects how awe-inspiring it must have seemed when first reconstructed. In the imagination, one can almost see it rising through the blue water, jaws opening, teeth flashing, as it snaps down upon a turtle, unaware of the doom beneath. Its skull, nearly 1/3 the length of its body, gave it the look of an animal designed almost entirely for the act of feeding. And in this design, evolution had built an apex predator unmatched in its environment. From the seas where Chronosaurus reigned, the story of giants shifts once more to the land, where the tallest mammals the earth has ever known stretched their necks above treetops, browsing leaves beyond the reach of any other creature. These were the Purussaurus, towering relatives of rhinos, whose sheer size made them rulers of ancient plains. On the vast plains of Asia, more than 20 million years ago, there walked a giant so immense that even the tallest giraffes of today would seem small beside it. This was Purussaurus, the tallest land mammal to have ever lived, a hornless relative of the rhinoceros, yet built on a scale that seems almost impossible to imagine. At its shoulders, it stood over 16 feet tall, and its body carried a weight of nearly 20 tons, as heavy as 4 African elephants combined. To see such a creature moving across the ancient steppe would have been to witness the earth itself reshaped into living form. Purussaurus's body was built for height and reach. Its legs were long and column-like, thick enough to bear its enormous weight, yet surprisingly slender when compared to the bulk of its body. Its neck stretched high, lifting its head into the branches of trees far beyond the reach of other grazers and browsers. Where smaller animals cropped at shrubs and grasses, Purussaurus fed on leaves, branches, and fruits from the tallest treetops. Its long prehensile lips, much like those of modern rhinos, were adapted to grasp and strip foliage, pulling branches close so its grinding teeth could crush even the toughest plant matter. Unlike the armored dinosaurs of earlier ages or the predators that shared its Miocene world, Paraceratherium carried no horns, no tusks, no obvious weapons. Its defense was its sheer size. Few predators, no matter how bold, would dare to challenge an animal so massive. Even large carnivores of its age, like the saber-toothed cats of Asia, would have been no more than a nuisance, harassing the calves perhaps, but unable to bring down a healthy adult. Paraceratherium walked unchallenged, its towering form making it both unassailable and essential to the environment it lived in. The world of Paraceratherium was one of shifting climates and spreading grasslands. Forests gave way to open plains, and with them came herds of grazers and browsers of every size. Yet no other mammal reached the scale of this hornless giant. Its massive body demanded enormous quantities of food, perhaps hundreds of pounds of leaves each day. Fossil sites suggest that it moved long distances in search of feeding grounds, much like elephants today migrate in search of water and forage. In doing so, Paraceratherium likely shaped the vegetation around it, breaking branches, clearing paths, and dispersing seeds through its dung. Its presence was not just that of a giant, but of an architect of the land. The remains of Paraceratherium have been uncovered across a wide region, from China to Kazakhstan, from Mongolia to Pakistan. These scattered fossils reveal just how successful it was, roaming vast territories in herds or loose groups. Imagine the sight of several of these giants walking together across a floodplain, their immense bodies raising clouds of dust with each step, their long necks swinging as they stripped trees bare. The sound of their movement alone would have carried for miles, a deep rumble of weight pressing into the earth. For all its size, Paraceratherium carried within its bones a story of fragility. To sustain itself, it relied on an abundance of trees and shrubs. As climates shifted and grasslands expanded, the food sources that supported giants like Paraceratherium grew scarcer. Over time, smaller and more adaptable animals replaced it, creatures better suited to the open environments of the later Miocene and Pliocene. The giant hornless rhino disappeared, leaving behind only its colossal bones as evidence that mammals, too, once reached sizes that rivaled the great dinosaurs of the past. I went extinct in the Oligocene, likely due to changing climates that reduced forests and food supply, along with competition from newer herbivores. From the high treetops where Paraceratherium once fed, towering above all other mammals, we move forward in time to meet another giant of the past. This one carried a single horn so immense that it may have inspired the legends of unicorns. It was Elasmotherium, the Siberian unicorn, a beast that roamed the icy steppes with a horn that could stretch as long as a man is tall. On the cold steppes of Eurasia, long after the age of dinosaurs had ended, there walked a creature that may have given rise to one of humanity's oldest and most enduring legends. It was a giant rhinoceros, but not like any alive today. Known as Elasmotherium, it grew as tall as a horse at the shoulder and stretched more than 15 feet from head to tail. What made it unforgettable, however, was the horn that rose from its forehead. Fossils suggest this horn could have been as long as 6 feet, a massive, keratin-covered weapon that earned Elasmotherium its nickname, the Siberian unicorn. Unlike the delicate, mythical unicorns of fairy tales, this animal was a true Ice Age giant. Its skull was thick and elongated, with a great bony dome that anchored the base of its horn. The horn itself has never been found intact, because keratin decays after death, but where marks on the bone show just how large and firmly attached it must have been. Imagine the silhouette of a massive rhino with a single towering horn, moving slowly through the grasslands of ancient Siberia and Central Asia. It was a sight that must have inspired awe in early humans who may have glimpsed these giants on the horizon. Elasmotherium was well adapted to the harsh, open landscapes it called home. It had long legs compared to modern rhinos, allowing it to move efficiently across vast distances in search of food. Its teeth and jaws were suited for grazing tough grasses, much like modern horses. Fossilized teeth show heavy wear, evidence that it ground down the fibrous plants of Ice Age steppes day after day. In this way, it played the role of a great grazer, shaping ecosystems by keeping grasses cropped and creating open patches for other plants to grow. The horn was not simply for display. It likely had many uses. Some scientists believe it helped males compete for mates, clashing together in powerful displays of dominance. Others think it may have been used to sweep snow aside during winter, clearing patches of frozen ground to uncover food. Whatever its function, the horn was the defining feature of Elasmotherium, the reason it stands apart from the many other rhinoceroses that lived and vanished during the Ice Age. For thousands of years, Elasmotherium thrived on the open plains of Eurasia. It coexisted with mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant deer, and early humans who spread into the same regions. Yet, like so many of the great Ice Age mammals, its reign eventually came to an end. Fossils suggest that the last Elasmotherium survived until as recently as 39,000 years ago, overlapping with humans far longer than once thought. The cause of their extinction seems to have been a combination of climate change and dwindling resources. As the Ice Age drew to a close, the environment shifted, and the grasses that sustained them began to change in distribution. Large, specialized grazers like Elasmotherium struggled to adapt. Their reliance on open steppes and tough grasses made them vulnerable when ecosystems grew more unstable. It is also possible that hunting by early humans added pressure, though there is little direct evidence of this. Even if people were not the primary cause, their presence alongside changing climates likely contributed to the stresses that drove the Siberian unicorn to extinction. By the time the mammoths were fading from northern Europe, Elasmotherium had already disappeared, its horn never to be seen again except in stories and stone. Yet, their memory may have lingered in human imagination. For centuries, myths of one-horned beasts have appeared in cultures across Eurasia, from ancient Persia to medieval Europe. Perhaps the tales of unicorns owe something to the awe inspired by real encounters with Elasmotherium, glimpsed across the steppes by early hunters, or remembered in fossils unearthed long before science could explain them. The Siberian unicorn was not a fantasy, but a living giant, proof that reality often creates creatures more extraordinary than myth. From the open plains where Elasmotherium once grazed with its towering horn, our journey now turns toward another mammal of power and strangeness. On the ancient plains of North America, herds of Brontotherium, the so-called thunder beasts, shook the ground as they passed, their dual horns rising like crowns above their heavy skulls. About 35 million years ago, long after the age of dinosaurs had ended, the plains of North America shook beneath the footsteps of creatures so massive that early paleontologists gave them a name worthy of their presence. They were called Brontotherium, meaning thunder beast, for it was imagined that the ground thundered when herds of these giants passed. Today, they are also known as Megacerops, but the older name has lingered, carrying with it a sense of power and awe. Brontotherium was a mammal, part of the order Perissodactyla, which also includes horses and rhinos. At first glance, it might remind us of a rhinoceros, with its heavy body, large head, and sturdy limbs, yet it carried a distinct feature that set it apart. On the front of its skull rose a pair of blunt, Y-shaped horns. Unlike the sharp, keratin-covered horns of modern rhinos, these were bony growths, wide and flat, fused directly to the skull. They were likely covered in skin rather than a sharp sheath, but they were formidable tools nonetheless, built for pushing, shoving, and displays of dominance. These horns were most prominent in males, suggesting they were used in battles for mates or to establish rank within herds. Imagine two thunder beasts squaring off, their massive bodies braced as they lowered their heads and collided with a resounding crash. Dust would rise around them, the air filled with the sound of bone striking bone, their struggles echoing across the ancient plains. Fossil evidence of worn horn surfaces hints at repeated use, as though these contests were a common part of life. Brontotherium itself stood over 8 feet tall at the shoulder and stretched nearly 15 feet in length. Its body was supported by thick, column-like legs, built more for strength than for speed. Though heavy, it was not a sluggish creature. Its size allowed it to move steadily across open landscapes, feeding on the vegetation that flourished in its environment. Its teeth, large and flat, were suited to chewing soft leaves and stems rather than grasses, which were only beginning to spread widely during that time. Brontotherium preferred wooded areas and floodplains where shrubs and trees provided the food it needed. The world it inhabited was one of transition. North America during the late Eocene epoch was warm, with forests spreading across much of the continent. Rivers wound their way through lowlands, and swamps provided rich feeding grounds. Alongside Brontotherium lived other remarkable mammals. Nimravids, early saber-toothed carnivores, prowled in search of prey, while primitive horses, no larger than dogs, grazed nearby. The diversity of life was immense, but in these landscapes, Brontotherium was among the largest and most imposing herbivores. Fossil discoveries reveal that these giants did not live alone but in groups, moving together in herds that may have offered protection against predators and stability for raising their young. Picture herds of Brontotherium spread across a river valley, their dual horns rising like strange crowns, their immense bodies dark against the green of ancient forests. Calves would have been sheltered in the middle, guarded by adults on all sides, while males occasionally clashed at the edges of the herd. Their presence would have dominated the landscape, shaping the ecosystems around them through their feeding habits and sheer numbers. For all their power, Brontotherium was not eternal. Around 35 million years ago, climate shifts began to change the world. Forests thinned as grasslands spread, and the softer vegetation that the thunder beasts depended upon became scarcer. Their large size, once an advantage, became a burden in a world where food was harder to find. One by one, the herds dwindled until the thunder of their passing was stilled. What remains are fossils, great skulls with fused horns lying in stone as reminders of a time when mammals carried shapes and sizes that rivaled the grandest reptiles of the past. From these herds that rumbled across the plains of North America, our journey flows onward to stranger shapes still, to elephants of the Miocene with tusks, not like spears but like shovels, creatures that used their jaws as tools to carve food from the wetlands. These were the Platybelodon, the shovel-tusked elephants that left behind one of the strangest skulls in the fossil record. Around 10 million years ago, during the Miocene epoch, the wetlands of Africa, Asia, and North America echoed with the sounds of creatures that seemed both familiar and strange. Among them walked Platybelodon, an ancient relative of the elephant, whose appearance would have startled any modern observer. At first glance, its body looked like that of a typical proboscidean, with a large frame, pillar-like legs, and a trunk extending from its face. But then the eyes would be drawn downward to its mouth, where a pair of bizarre lower tusks stretched outward and flattened into broad, shovel-like blades. It was these strange tusks that gave Platybelodon its reputation as one of the most unusual mammals to have ever lived. The shovel-shaped tusks were not ornaments or weapons but tools, honed by evolution for survival. Each tusk was wide and sharp at the edge, perfectly suited for cutting, scooping, and stripping vegetation. Paleontologists studying wear patterns on fossilized tusks discovered grooves and scratches that reveal how these animals used them. Platybelodon likely swept its lower jaw through swampy vegetation, slicing soft plants and pulling them into its mouth with the help of its trunk. In other moments, it may have used its tusks like giant clippers, shearing bark from trees or cutting branches that were too tough for teeth alone. These adaptations turned the animal's unusual face into a living multi-tool designed to exploit the abundance of food found in wetlands. The Miocene world was rich with opportunities for such specialists. Expansive marshes and river valleys spread across continents, their waters bordered by reeds, water lilies, and thick mats of aquatic plants. In these environments, Platybelodon thrived, moving in herds through shallow water and muddy ground. Their size, similar to that of modern elephants, would have made them imposing figures, their strange tusks glinting in the light as they lowered their heads to sweep vegetation into their mouths. With each motion, they transformed the wetlands, clearing pathways through reeds and opening spaces for new growth. In this way, they became both consumers and shapers of their environment, altering the very landscapes they depended on. Despite their unusual tusks, Platybelodon shared many features with modern elephants. Their trunks would have been essential for grasping and pulling food, drinking water, and perhaps even for social communication. Like today's elephants, they may have lived in groups, bound together by strong social bonds. Fossil sites suggest that multiple individuals sometimes died together, hinting at herds moving across the land as a unit. Imagine a gathering of these creatures at a Miocene riverbank, their calls echoing across the water as they fed and rested. The sight would have been both alien and familiar, a reminder of how evolution recycles ideas while endlessly reshaping them. The lives of Platybelodon were not without challenges. Large predators of the Miocene, such as saber-toothed cats and bear dogs, prowled the same landscapes, while the sheer size of an adult Platybelodon likely discouraged most attacks. Younger individuals would have been vulnerable. Herd life may have provided protection, with adults forming a defensive circle around calves, their tusks not only tools for feeding, but also weapons when danger pressed too close. Over time, climates shifted, wetlands shrank, grasslands spread, and plants that had once been abundant gave way to tougher vegetation. Platybelodon, so finely adapted to scooping and slicing soft aquatic plants, struggled as the world around it changed. Other proboscideans, with different tusk shapes and feeding strategies, proved more versatile in the face of new conditions. Eventually, Platybelodon disappeared, its line giving way to the ancestors of modern elephants, whose straight or curved tusks and versatile diets allowed them to endure. Yet the fossils of Platybelodon remain as silent witnesses to its strange design. Their broad, shovel-like tusks still bear the scratches of ancient meals. Their bones still tell of animals that flourished in wetlands, where reeds swayed in the wind and rivers rolled gently through the land. To imagine Platybelodon is to imagine a world where even giants could evolve in unexpected ways, their bodies shaped into living tools by the abundance of their environments. It went extinct during the late Miocene as wetlands receded and tougher grasses replaced the soft vegetation it depended on. From the marshes where shovel-tusked elephants once thrived, the story of Earth's giants shifts again, this time to the forests of Asia, where towering shapes moved silently among the bamboo. These were Gigantopithecus, the great apes that grew taller than any human and may have inspired myths of giants in cultures long after they were gone. In the dense forests of ancient Asia, there once lived an ape so immense that it has become the closest thing to the legendary King Kong. This was Gigantopithecus, a primate that could grow to nearly 10 feet tall and weigh as much as 1,200 pounds. Imagine the shadows beneath the trees, where the air was thick with the scent of bamboo and the calls of countless animals, and among them moved a figure so towering that it dwarfed every other primate to ever walk the earth. Gigantopithecus lived around 300,000 years ago, a time when early humans were already shaping their world with tools and fire. Yet in the forests of China, India, and Southeast Asia, these giants thrived in a realm of green, hidden beneath the canopies, where sunlight only filtered in scattered beams. Their size alone would have been awe-inspiring, but it was not their strength or their presence that allowed them to dominate these forests. Instead, it was their diet, specialized and steady, built almost entirely on bamboo. Fossil evidence tells us this story through teeth, enormous molars with thick enamel, designed to grind and crush the fibrous stalks of bamboo. Just as modern pandas depend on bamboo despite its limited nutrition, so too did Gigantopithecus find its survival tied to this plant. They likely spent much of their days feeding, stripping bamboo stalks, chewing slowly, and consuming vast amounts to sustain their bulk. At their size, the quantity of bamboo required would have been immense, and the forests must have echoed with the sound of snapping stalks as groups of these apes fed together. Their skulls suggest powerful jaws, capable of exerting enormous force. This strength was not for tearing flesh, but for breaking tough plant matter, roots, and perhaps even fruits or seeds. They were gentle giants in many ways, using size as protection rather than aggression. Few predators would have risked confronting a creature of such scale, especially one that lived in groups. For early humans who may have glimpsed them, the sight of a 1,200-pound ape towering in the shadows would have blurred the line between myth and reality, leaving impressions that may have inspired stories carried forward into legend. The forests of Asia at that time were rich ecosystems, home to elephants, rhinos, giant deer, and predators such as tigers and ancient crocodiles. Yet even in this company of giants, Gigantopithecus stood apart. Its sheer size made it an anchor of its environment, much like elephants are today. By consuming bamboo in such enormous quantities, it would have shaped the spread of these plants, opening gaps in the forest floor that allowed new growth to emerge. In this way, Gigantopithecus was not just a participant in its ecosystem, but a shaper of it. But such specialization also carried risk. When climates began to change, forests receded, and bamboo groves diminished, the very foundation of their survival crumbled. Unlike smaller primates that could adapt to new foods and new habitats, Gigantopithecus was too large, too dependent on bamboo, and too slow to adjust. The same forests that once sheltered them became fragmented, their food supply shrinking until survival was no longer possible. By the time early humans were spreading more widely across Asia, the giant apes were already in decline. The last Gigantopithecus may have walked the forests around 300,000 years ago, their immense figures fading from the land as silently as they had once appeared. Today, All that remains are their teeth and fragments of their jaws, fossils so large that they astonished the first researchers who studied them. From these fragments, scientists reconstructed the largest ape to have ever lived, a gentle titan whose existence bridges the gap between reality and myth. And from the silent forests once ruled by Gigantopithecus, the story turns again to another predator of ancient times, a bird that brought terror on long legs and sharp beaks as it migrated north into new lands. This was Titanus, the last of the terror birds to stalk the open country of North America. In the sweeping grasslands and icy valleys of North America during the last ice age, there roamed a predator that towered over nearly every creature it encountered. This was Argentavis simus, better known as the short-faced bear, one of the largest bears to ever live. When it reared up on its hind legs, it could stand as tall as 12 feet, its head rising higher than the top of many doorways today. Even on all fours, its shoulders reached the height of a grown man's chest, making it a giant among giants in a land already crowded with mammoths, mastodons, and saber-toothed cats. The short-faced bear earned its name from the shape of its skull. Unlike modern brown bears, which have longer snouts, Argentavis had a shorter and broader face, with powerful jaws and an enormous nasal cavity. That large nasal passage suggests it had an exceptional sense of smell, capable of detecting carcasses from miles away. Combined with its long legs and powerful stride, this made it not only a predator but also one of the most effective scavengers of its time. It could arrive first at a kill, chase away other predators, and claim the prize for itself. What makes this bear even more remarkable is the speed it likely possessed. Despite its enormous size, some studies suggest that Argentavis could run as fast as a horse over short distances. Its long limbs, much longer than those of modern bears, hint at a body built for covering ground quickly, allowing it to chase down prey or intimidate competitors. Imagine an Ice Age hunter, larger than any grizzly, suddenly breaking into a gallop across open tundra, its enormous paws thundering against frozen soil, each stride carrying it forward with terrifying speed. As an apex predator, the short-faced bear shaped the ecosystems around it. Fossil evidence suggests it hunted when it could, perhaps ambushing horses, camels, or bison, but it also excelled at stealing kills. Saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, despite their fearsome reputations, would have stood little chance against a 12-foot bear intent on driving them from their meal. Its towering frame, immense jaws, and sheer aggression would have been enough to scatter smaller predators, leaving the short-faced bear to feed on the spoils. In this way, it acted as both hunter and scavenger, ensuring that it always had a place at the top of the food chain. The Ice Age world of North America was one of extremes. Vast glaciers stretched across the continent, pushing herds of animals into narrow corridors of grassland and woodland. It was in these rich but crowded environments that Argentavis thrived. Wherever prey gathered, the bear was never far behind. Its dominance was not just in strength but in presence. Few animals would challenge a short-faced bear, and even the great cats of the Ice Age likely yielded to its power. Yet, for all its might, Argentavis was not immune to change. Around 12,000 years ago, as the Ice Age drew to a close, climates warmed, glaciers retreated, and the great herds that had once supported the bear began to decline. At the same time, humans had arrived in the Americas, skilled hunters who could bring down large animals and alter entire landscapes with fire and tools. For a predator as specialized and demanding as the short-faced bear, this combination of dwindling prey and new competition proved devastating. Over time, its numbers dwindled until the last of these giants disappeared, leaving only bones in caves and riverbeds to tell their story. From the haunting image of a 12-foot bear striding across frozen plains, we move now to a gentler but no less extraordinary creature. Deep within carboniferous forests, long before mammals or bears ever walked the land, there crawled an insect so vast that its body stretched the length of a man. This was Arthropleura, the giant millipede that turned fallen leaves and rotting wood into fuel for its enormous, armored frame. In the shadowy forests of the Carboniferous period, more than 300 million years ago, the ground rustled with creatures that would seem like nightmares today. Beneath towering club mosses and giant ferns, an animal as long as a grown man was tall crept slowly across the leaf litter. This was Arthropleura, the giant millipede, a segmented invertebrate that stretched up to 8 feet in length. Imagine a millipede larger than a crocodile, its armored plates glistening in the filtered light of a swampy forest, its countless legs moving in hypnotic waves as it made its way through the undergrowth. For all its monstrous appearance, Arthropleura was not a predator. It was a herbivore, feeding on decaying plants, fallen leaves, and perhaps the soft tissues of ferns and mosses. Its mouth parts were not designed for tearing flesh, but for grinding vegetation. In this way, it played an essential role in its ecosystem, recycling plant matter into nutrients that enriched the soil. Still, for smaller creatures of the time, the sheer bulk of Arthropleura must have made it a living wall of armored plates, a slow-moving force that dominated the forest floor. The Carboniferous world where Arthropleura thrived was very different from the one we know. Dense forests stretched across much of the planet, filled with primitive plants that grew in thick, tangled mats. Swamps and wetlands covered vast regions, their humid air heavy with the scent of decay. But the most remarkable feature of this ancient world was the air itself. Oxygen levels were far higher than they are today, reaching up to 35% of the atmosphere, compared to just 21% now. This abundance of oxygen allowed arthropods, insects, and other invertebrates to grow to sizes far beyond what we see today. Arthropleura was one of the most striking examples of this evolutionary experiment, a creature made possible by an atmosphere richer than any we could imagine. Its body was divided into dozens of segments, each one covered by a pair of hard, overlapping plates that gave it both protection and flexibility. Beneath those plates, legs sprouted in pairs, moving in perfect rhythm as it crawled across the ground. The sight would have been mesmerizing, like watching a living ripple of legs carrying a plated fortress across the forest floor. Fossil trackways, preserved in ancient sediments, show the wide, parallel paths it carved as it traveled, silent evidence of its passage through long-vanished landscapes. Despite its size, Arthropleura was harmless to the larger animals of its day. Amphibians and early reptiles were beginning to spread through these forests, some of them hunters, but few would have risked attacking such a heavily armored creature. Its defense was not speed or aggression, but sheer mass and armor, a strategy that allowed it to thrive without ever needing to fight. In a world where survival often depended on tooth and claw, Arthropleura succeeded simply by being too large and too tough to bother with. As mighty as it was, its reign was tied to the conditions of the Carboniferous. When oxygen levels began to fall and climates shifted, the environment that had allowed Arthropleura to reach such an extraordinary size no longer supported it. The dense, swampy forests began to decline, giving way to drier conditions and new types of vegetation. Without the rich atmosphere and endless mats of decaying plants, the giant millipede faded into extinction, leaving behind only fossils and trackways to tell of its existence. From the image of this armored colossus creeping slowly beneath towering ferns, the story of lost giants continues into another chapter of Earth's history. In the volcanic islands of the ancient Caribbean, an entire city would one day be buried in ash, its people fleeing a catastrophe that swallowed everything they knew. But long before that human tragedy, the planet had already endured countless extinctions, each one erasing creatures that once seemed eternal. Among them were the thunderous brontotheres, the colossal sloths, the terror birds, and even Arthroplura, the harmless nightmare of the Carboniferous forest. And as those vanished worlds gave way to new ones, the stage was set for humanity's age to come. For hundreds of millions of years, Earth has been a stage where life has taken on forms so extraordinary that they almost defy belief. Across deep oceans, in dense forests, and upon windswept plains, there once moved creatures so immense and so fearsome that they blurred the line between legend and reality. Snakes longer than buses coiled through steaming swamps. Sharks with teeth the size of human hands hunted whales in open seas, and birds taller than men stalked the land with hooked beaks. Even gentle giants, like sloths the size of elephants or rhino-like mammals that towered higher than giraffes, carried with them an air of awe that lingers long after their bones turn to stone. These were not myths, not tales told around fires to stir the imagination, but real animals that once ruled the world we now call home. And yet, they are gone. Extinction swept them away, as it has swept away nearly every creature that has ever lived. Climate shifted, seas rose and fell, continents drifted, and the delicate balance of ecosystems changed in ways that no species, no matter how mighty, could withstand. The fall of these giants cleared space for others to rise, and in time it created the opening for humans to step into a world where such predators no longer hunted the night. The relief is real, for it is difficult to imagine how our kind could have survived alongside a Titanoboa or a saber-toothed cat. But there is also wonder, a quiet awe in knowing that life has been tested again and again, and still it continues. Every fossil buried in the earth is a reminder of this fragile thread. The bones of a Dunkleosteus, jaws frozen in eternal gape, tell of seas where armored fish ruled. The tracks of Arthroplura, pressed into ancient mud, capture the weight of a millipede as long as a car. The skull of a short-faced bear, wide and heavy, speaks of a hunter that once scattered wolves and cats from their meals. These remnants are not just relics of the past, they are markers of survival and loss, each one a page in the story that led to us. We are the descendants not of giants, but of the small and the adaptable, the creatures that endured after catastrophe erased the larger, stronger, and seemingly invincible. It is humbling to realize that we walk upon a planet built on the bones of giants. Their absence made room for us. Their disappearance shaped the path that allowed humans to thrive. And though they are gone, their stories remain written in stone, waiting patiently until we uncovered them. Through these remains, the world whispers of what once was, reminding us that life is both powerful and delicate, capable of shaping titans, yet always vulnerable to change. So tonight, as we drift through these memories of Earth's forgotten monsters, let us carry both relief and gratitude. Relief that we do not share our world with creatures that could swallow crocodiles whole or chase down horses across the plains, and gratitude that we can still uncover their bones, study their stories, and marvel at the creativity of evolution. Their extinction gave us a world in which we could flourish, but their memory keeps us mindful of how fragile survival truly island. Stay curious and stay calm as you journey deeper into the mysteries of Earth's past. For though the giants are gone, their shadows linger, reminding us that our own place on this planet is but a fleeting chapter in a story that is far older and far grander than we can ever imagine.